Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily,
I'm Greg.
and today we are going to be discussing. This is Stanley Weinbaum, right?
No, this is Isaac
Isaac
Asimov.
Asimov! Dang it! I keep mixing him up. Okay, this is Isaac Asimov, and today we are reading the short story Reason, which
Mhm.
is super fun. So I'll let you give details
Okay.
and history of this guy.
Okay. Well, fitting into my attempt to read and report on everything by Isaac Asimov in order of publication, Reason is number 14.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the second of his positronic robot stories.
Mm-hmm.
Although in this one, there's still no mention of the three laws.
Okay.
But you can kind of feel him
Mm-hmm. Working his
moving
way
towards
into
that
that.
in this
Yes.
one. So it actually fits into a small series within the robot series, which is specifically about two characters named Mike Donovan and Greg Powell.
Mm-hmm.
There were a total of four stories
Okay.
that feature those characters that are
Nice.
just kind of going around the solar system,
Doing their jobs.
doing their jobs and encountering these robots that are not acting quite right. And so this story is just a short story. It was published in the April 1941 issue of Astounding Science Fiction. So it was purchased by John W. Campbell. It did not get the cover story of that issue, but it definitely made a splash.
Yes, I can definitely see how this one was potentially even controversial, which is interesting.
Hmm.
So synopsis is Mike and what's the other guy's name again? Oh my gosh,
Greg.
Mike and Greg.
Greg.
Greg,
How can you forget?
block out your name when I know it. I don't want to think about Greg right now. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
Uh, so Mike and Greg are working and they just finished building this robot called QT, which they call Cutie. Um, and they get him operational and they're explaining to him, hey, we just built you, this is your function, that sort of thing. And the robot's like, who says? Like, wait, no, that can't be right. And they're like, excuse me? And the robot's like, there's absolutely no way you as a being made me who is perfect. Like, you can't create things that are perfect because the law, there's that, the law that nothing can be made that is greater than the thing that made it.
Hmm.
And so based off that logic, he's like, nah, it couldn't have been you. And so they're sitting there trying to explain, like, yeah, we literally just finished assembling you, and you were built by machines who, are operated by people on Earth. And he's like, yeah, there's no Earth. So the guy's like, what do you think all those stars out there are? He's like, I think that's just a black material with pinlights through it. Or basically, he's like, just, like, it's very kid logic. This robot is
Hmm.
very bare minimum kid logic. So he's like, you know what? I don't believe you guys. I'm gonna go work it out myself. And the humans are like, okay, whatever. And as the robot goes off and is working it out for himself, they're realizing there's a big solar storm coming. So there's some tension of how they're going to keep the solar beams that they are sending back to Earth and information they're sending back to Earth and from other planets during this solar storm.
Hmm.
And then the robot comes back and it says, you know, I still don't think you made me. I think we were made by the master, which is basically the computer of the whole ship. The engine room and that sort of thing. Its main components. So the robot starts worshiping this thing
Hmm.
and starts telling the other robots on board about the master. And so the other robots decide he's a prophet. And so
Yeah.
the humans are just like, what the heck is going on? And so eventually the robots are like, we're taking over, you're obsolete. We're gonna go give you some food and water and take care of you in this room and just let us worship our master as we see fit.
Hmm.
So the solar storm that the humans were really worried about comes and goes, and they realize from the data that the robots bring them as a form of, kindness and gesture, being like, here's some data since you guys like that so much. Um, they realize the robot executed his job perfectly,
Hmm.
which they were concerned about because he's worshiping the ship main
Yeah.
computer essentially.
And he's thinking that the place where it's beaming power to Earth
Yeah,
doesn't even exist.
doesn't even
So,
exist. So, but he's like, this is what the computer wants and my master wants. So this is, what I'm going to do. And then the humans are like, but what do you think the beaming is for? And he's like, it's not my job to understand the master. It's very like parody of religion.
Yep.
And so the humans are just beside themselves and they're just kind of like, well, we can't reason with him because all his reason is based off of assumptions. And so we can't prove anything that he's assumed because there is no, like, there's just no way to prove any of this until we take him to Earth and show him how robots were made.
Hmm.
But he's never going to get to Earth. So they're like, we got a shift change coming. We'll just wait until they arrive and we'll switch out and everything will be fine and we won't have to deal with this stinking robot anymore. So they do, but they don't change anything.
Yeah.
The robot still thinks that the master is the supercomputer or the ship's computer. And the two guys go and tell the other guy, "Yeah, you should really have your work cut out for you," essentially right at the end because the robots literally are executing things so perfect that the humans are obsolete because they've decided to worship the central computer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the story,
Yeah.
which is hilarious to me. It's like, as long as he's not hurting anything and he's doing exactly what he's supposed to, let's just leave him alone
Yep.
and let him do his thing,
Hmm.
which I think is very, very funny. And yeah, I liked this story a lot.
This story, it's one of the most anthologized and reprinted of
Hmm.
Asimov stories, and for good reason.
Hmm.
Um, it works on so many different levels. I mean, he's taking this situation where the robot is using pure reason,
Hmm.
kind of like the Greek philosophers,
Yeah.
ancient Greek philosophers arrived at things through pure logic and reason,
Hmm.
not observational evidence like
Yes.
science does.
Yes.
And so the robot's just using its logic to figure everything out instead of getting, observational evidence of things or relying on humans to tell
Hmm.
them what's up.
Yes.
Even though we all know humans created the robots, they created the station,
They
there is an
created, yeah.
Earth, even though there's all these truths, and the robot is saying, no, that's all false.
Hmm.
So it works on that level of pointing out how something can be totally reasonable and yet totally wrong.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's why the ancient Greek philosophy way of getting at truth was kind of tempered with
Hmm.
scientific observational evidence and
Yes.
and experimentation.
Hmm.
So Asimov's first level is talking about that, how a computational being, and this is supposed to be the first robot that has self-awareness.
Yeah.
All
This is
previous
first
robot
first
models
generation AI.
are
Hmm.
are not aware at all. This is
Hmm.
the first one to pass the Turing test and be
Yeah.
self-aware.
Yeah.
And so it is the first one to be
A free thinker.
completely free thinking
Hmm.
through reason and logic. And it's using its logic to figure these things out. The second thing Asimov is doing is talking about religion
Yes.
and talking about how our religions accept truths based on what has been thought through in the religion, not observational evidence.
Yes.
And yet, still, he points out that things still can operate well even under a false assumption.
Hmm. Yes.
So human civilization has been able to move forward even though it's been following the Bible,
Hmm.
because the Bible has not stopped us from being able to accomplish the things that we
Yeah.
want to accomplish. And that's what's happening with the robots here. They're accomplishing what they're doing because the
Yeah.
master wants it done. And
Yes.
who are we to question the master?
Yes.
The basic religious argument
Hmm.
that it's God's word and it's just God's word.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
we just believe it.
hmm
And I think it's interesting too
Take it on
that
faith.
multiple faiths, whether they are deity based or not, have all come to a sense of understanding of morality,
Hmm.
what is right and wrong,
Hmm.
without necessarily agreeing with each other on anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what he's speaking to, is that humans have figured out how to function and build this morality regardless of what religions they believe in. I
Hmm.
mean, some of them haven't, but there are also misled sects of different world religions and things like that. And so, but it's come up with this concept of morality and how humans learn to live with each other even though they're all different, which I thought was very interesting as well.
Hmm.
Um,
And it points out how that kind of thinking can lead us um, to not listen to people who are telling us the truth, like
mhm,
with Galileo and Kepler and
mhm,
the scientific evidence that they had, which contradicted what the church believed.
mhm.
Okay, even though it had absolutely nothing to do with anything in the Bible,
Yeah,
um, it contradicted what the church believed, which was based on Aristotle way back in Greece.
yeah.
And so they, made life hell for the two of those early
Mhm.
scientists, but this Kepler and Galileo were right.
Yeah.
They were just right. It was the truth. If
Yes.
you're going to stand there and say that you're all for the truth, but then not accept the truth that these
Yes.
people are handing you, then you've just shown how you are ineffective
Mhm.
and not working to um, support the truth anymore.
Yes.
And so that's another layer of complexity. And of course, that comes into our world today where we've
Mhm.
got so much question about what is fake, what is real,
Mhm.
who is right, should we follow religion, should we follow science, all these questions
And
that
can they
we face right now.
coexist?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people are questioning now too. Can they even coexist?
Oh yeah.
And that is a huge question.
And it's entering into our politics and
Hmm.
affecting the future of our government,
Absolutely.
which means it's going to affect the lives of all of us into the future, what
Absolutely.
gains power
Yeah.
over us.
Yes.
um, and it's all coming from these same kinds of thinking that this robot is going through in this story.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
there's just all these layers of complexity to this story
Yeah.
that are not stated.
Yes. And I love the social implications of this
Mhm,
as well. The robot is well-meaning. The
mhm,
robot is fulfilling its function. And the robot is still showing kindness. But this condescension that it has towards these inferior beings,
mhm,
and stating, in fact, that they are inferior beings, it's basically a commentary on racism.
mhm,
Like, we thought because we were so civilized and had so much more and all this other stuff,
mhm,
that the black people and brown people from Africa are these tribes that looked less civil, quote
mhm,
unquote, um, were inferior
mhm.
because they didn't have the same resources and assets that we did, or they didn't make the same discoveries quite at the same time we did.
Or even the attitudes of a lot of people who have accepted Jesus and they walk around looking down their nose at
Yeah,
people who haven't.
very self-righteous people.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even, I mean, some Buddhists are kind of like that too. I've met a couple Buddhists who are like, "Oh yeah, Buddha, I've reached enlightenment." I'm like, "Bro, the fact that you're stating it means you didn't." Like, you just absolutely not. But I think it does give people a superiority complex
Hmm.
when they think they've attached themselves to a cause or a greater purpose or a higher power. It makes them feel better about themselves, and therefore they are superior to other people.
And the funny thing I find about that is when I see those same people not giving up their seat to an elderly couple.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you're supposed to be the superior Christian?
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
even follow the Bible and I gave up my seat to
and I
help
think
these
that's
people.
the difference in this story,
Yeah.
is that the robot is actually fulfilling his function.
Hmm.
Religious people do not actually fulfill their function. They are imperfect, and that was the point of needing, say, a religion,
Hmm.
is to explain our imperfection and reach for something better, even though we'll never achieve it.
Yeah.
And that's what this robot has done,
Right.
is it is fulfilling his function
Hmm.
with the understanding that he is achieving without understanding fully why he is achieving, but it is pleasing his deity.
Yeah.
And like, the whole, like, I was raised in a Christian home, so theology, I went to a Christian school, I did theology classes, like a lot of this stuff is very bare bones basic, where it's very obvious that a lot of people don't actually know what the Bible says.
Hmm.
Like the whole Christian faith, the only people you're supposed to correct according to the Bible is other Christians or other people claiming to be Christians,
Yeah.
not the non-believers. Yeah, you're supposed to help and convert people, but they'll know we are Christians through our love, not through you're going to hell and we hate the gays and we hate all this stuff and just all this hate and hate and hate and hate and hate.
Yeah.
Um, and if God is supposed to be love, then you are supposed to be showing love to people. Yes, you can be honest with them, but there are better ways of showing that. Like honesty without love is just cruelty.
Hmm.
So people are also misunderstanding it and not necessarily fulfilling their function even as religious people.
Right.
And that's the big difference, I think, philosophically
Hmm.
between this robot and humanity is
Hmm.
he's actually fulfilling his function without fully understanding why.
But he's a robot. He can't possibly not
Yes.
fulfill his function. He's designed that
Yes.
way. He's going to do it.
And even if in that mystery, that is his job, that is his function,
Hmm.
humans are going to fight that mystery.
Yeah.
Or humans are going to say, well, that's not fair. God doesn't give a crap about whether it's fair. It's whether or not it's right.
Yeah.
Or enlightenment and being one with the universe doesn't give a crap. Reincarnation doesn't give a crap about well intentions. Is did you hurt people? You might be
Mhm.
coming back as a rock. Like that's just it. So not fulfilling your function has consequences, and in this one, fulfilling his function has no consequences. He's
Yeah.
executing it perfectly.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's an interesting discrepancy to make.
And Asimov does this complex story in just, what is it, short story
Like
novelette?
10, 20 pages.
Yeah, it is just a short story. Within a short story, he creates this whole complex thing, but he does it in a very light manner,
Yeah.
a light, humorous manner.
Yes. It's very situational humor.
And there are even there are even much more complicated feelings going on in this story than you would expect for 1941,
Mm-hmm.
when um, Donovan and Blake, or Donovan and Powell, I mean, are getting ready to leave. And the robot is saying, "Oh, so you've fulfilled your purpose and are no longer needed." And the
Mm-hmm.
robot sounds actually sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
The robot shows some humanity, and I mean that was just brilliant for
Mm-hmm.
1941.
Yeah.
It There was never a robot story like that written before this.
Mm-hmm. Where it could have human emotions like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the fact that it explains that away with like, well, such is the mystery of the master.
Hmm.
It's just very funny.
Hmm.
It was like grieving death. He was
Hmm.
basically grieving their death
Yeah.
because they fulfilled their function and were getting sent away.
Hmm.
I think that was very funny.
He
I
probably
enjoyed
thought
that.
the master would
Yeah.
put
And
it
I love
down.
the other little robots too, like just going along with it and calling him a prophet and all that stuff, even though they weren't supposed to be as free thinking. Like they've just been told the truth and started blindly following.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was very funny as
And
well.
that again is how it works
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
human
For
for
some, it
human beings.
does. They just want to attach themselves to a cause and feel like they're part of something bigger.
Hmm.
But my whole thing is like, I don't feel like you need a religion necessarily to have morality. I think
No.
there's a social contract that very basically makes that morality apparent.
Oh, definitely. I mean, religion was an institution to try and force people who otherwise would not act in a moral way
Mm-hmm.
to, be good people.
Yes.
People who would be out there stealing, raping, killing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, they were told you will be damned and go to hell if you don't,
Yeah. It was to use a
and
fear
that was to
tactic.
try and rein them in, and try and keep them
Mm-hmm.
from being horrible people. So religion had that important function for a very long time. Now we try to do it with law.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are perfect, of course, because we still have people who are assholes.
Yeah. And because nothing can be made that is greater than us.
Yeah.
Because we're the ones making it. We're imperfect people. And
Mhm.
we're just trying to do our best with all these, especially in America, with this melting pot of religions and people from different places and with different thoughts and values and philosophies. It is very difficult to make universally sound laws where everyone's happy, especially when you have other religious groups who think everyone else is wrong.
Well, and
Or
you have people who are total narcissists
yeah,
who
or
think
non-religious
that
groups that think
the only
everybody's
good
wrong.
thing is whatever benefits them, and even if
Yes.
it hurts somebody else.
Yes. And some people, they say they're Christian, but their God is actually capitalism.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I think that happens all over the world, though.
Hmm.
I don't think it's just limited to America or, Christian. I think we have, issues with the Middle East having terrorist issues,
Hmm.
and having these extremist groups and dictatorships and all kinds of things over all of history
Hmm.
where they have used religion in the name of power or power in the name of religion and
And
vice
that
versa.
that actually brings up another whole topic that's not really blatantly stated in this story, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hinted at,
Mm-hmm.
and that is that question of how can something imperfect build something that is more perfect? And we have to ask at this time, first of all, are the machines we're building, are they better than us? Are they more perfect
Mm-hmm.
than us? As they become closer to self-awareness, are we going to put our faults into them and have them be just as damaged as we are?
Mm-hmm.
Or will they be acting if they were to follow Asimov's three laws of robotics, they would act in a proper morality for robots.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be better than us.
Yeah.
And then it brings up the question, well, then, the whole question of how can evolution climb up a scale towards something higher?
Mm-hmm.
And is it really?
Yeah.
Um, if you work on that by that assumption of something that's less perfect cannot create something that's more perfect, or is
Mm-hmm.
it, are we truly defying entropy and reaching toward a more perfect, more complex being and existence
Mm-hmm.
in defiance of the whole idea of systems breaking down
Yeah. No, and that's a
over
great
time?
question. Those are great questions to bring up too. And it starts making me personally, as we've had conversations about AI becoming more popular, more intelligent, blah blah blah, that sort of stuff. I start seeing that just because it seems more intelligent than us doesn't mean it's still not without its flaws.
Yeah.
Like ChatGPT still has disclaimers that say this could be wrong information, please double check sources,
Hmm.
kind of things. Or when I think of robotics specifically, if electricity suddenly goes down, like I was literally going through the drive-through at Burger King today to try and get some lunch before I came over here to film, and their electricity was out and all their fryers were down. They couldn't make anything.
Hmm.
They were cleaning and trying to fix things and get things fixed, but like they couldn't do anything. They couldn't fulfill anything because electricity was down.
My mother used to work at Kmart,
Mm-hmm.
and she would always swear every time all the Kmart stores were networked to
Mm-hmm.
the head office in Michigan.
Yeah.
And if a thunderstorm came through and put the power out, they would lose that connection with Michigan.
Yeah.
And that meant none of the cash registers could
Everything didn't
function.
work. Mm-hmm.
So everybody had to get out paper and pencil and figure tax and charge people the
Mm-hmm.
correct amount and
To keep things
collect the
going.
correct amount of money, give back the correct amount of change. But the younger people on the cash registers didn't know how to do it because they had always used calculators.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
that's the situation we're heading for. If
yes.
if we use up our fossil fuels, if the coal mines go
Mm-hmm.
out, if we don't have alternate power sources, when we use up our resources, which we will someday, how
Mm-hmm.
quickly, I don't know, but
Yeah.
we will get there someday at the rate we're going.
Yeah.
And there's nothing replacing it.
Yeah.
And what happens to all of our computers when we reach that day? They all shut down.
Exactly.
And so none of the AI stuff is going to be functioning. They're
Yeah.
going to have to go back to using humans to do those
Mm-hmm.
things. But by that time, I'm sure it's going to be I'm going to be dead and dust by the time this happens. But if something like this does happen to us, nothing is going to be able to function because nobody will remember how to do it.
Yeah.
Nobody has done that job in years. The AI
Yes.
took care of it.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I keep thinking of too, is like these robots, when if an energy source stops being available,
Hmm.
like electricity, they have no way to recharge. And people will be like, "Oh, what about solar?" I'm like, "Solar panels have to be made by machine as as of right now.
Hmm.
There are processes that humans can't come in contact with.
Yeah.
It'll corrupt the system.
Yeah.
So they have to be built by machines and they have a lifespan. Solar panels will stop working.
Hmm.
And then how do we get rid of those solar
Well,
panels?
and here's another one that
And
we
how do you
just
fix
recently
it?
went through with the big um, sun flares
Yeah.
and the auroras we've had.
Yeah.
That I didn't notice. I didn't notice anything or see any reports of it, but that kind of thing can disrupt electromagnetic systems.
Hmm.
So, computers, cell phones, all that kind of thing can experience downtime
Oh yeah.
during big solar storms like that. Well, this station is out there in space,
Hmm.
and there's a solar storm coming to it. Asimov didn't think of this, but that whole station could have been put down
Yeah.
if, especially if there aren't any human beings there anymore,
Yeah.
just robots. If they aren't properly shielded from the EM radiation coming from the sun, or not
Hmm.
EM, but the solar radiation, then the whole thing could go down.
Yeah.
And if Earth is relying on that power, a lot of things on Earth could go down. And while the issue in the story is keeping that beam focused, because if
Hmm.
it goes out of focus on the correct spot on Earth,
Yeah.
then you have basically this huge giant um,
Laser beam.
it wouldn't have been a laser beam, but a beam of high energy focused on a city, just
Yeah. A
prying all the
wrong part of
people.
Earth and just
you know.
killing people.
So
Yeah.
there's those kinds of issues inherent in
Hmm.
that kind of technology being given complete control over a process like
Yes.
that.
And that's what we run into as well with problems with AI. So the
Hmm.
beauty is that even though this was written in when? The 40s, 30s?
1941.
1941, it's still relevant to us today as we
It
develop
is.
more technology and have to really sit and think about computer ethics and
Hmm.
think about our reliance on technology. Like, I do too. I have life supporting machines that keep me alive. I'm a
Hmm.
type 1 diabetic with an insulin pump.
Hmm.
If I don't have access to electricity to keep recharging my insulin pump, I'm
You
going
could go back on the
I
needle.
could go back on the needle, assuming that needles are, if there's a huge, let's say, world crisis. I always just tell my friends, if there's like an apocalypse, just let me go. Like, stop trying to keep me alive. It is going to be so much work because you have to assume that needles will still be available.
Hmm.
And if they're manufactured by machinery, in institutions where plastic molding needs to be done, injection molding needs to be done, and those machines can't operate because they are electronic, I'm shit out of luck when
Well,
I run out of
a needle
needles.
that you are using, you could sterilize it with alcohol and reuse it
Yes.
until it
But
breaks.
yeah, but that's the issue. If it breaks,
Mhm.
access to the next needle that I would need to survive
Right,
is the biggest thing.
right.
So there are things like that that people don't think about it until it's too late.
Hmm.
Like I at one time forgot my charger while I was out of town for a couple days, and I was really living on a hope and a prayer then because my battery was starting to get low, and thankfully it didn't come to my insulin pump shutting down on me. I was able to get home and be able to charge it in time.
Hmm.
But those are things we have such a reliance on technology, and we have such a reliance on these energy sources. And what happens when we don't?
Hmm.
When they're not there for us anymore. And that's definitely something we have to start thinking about as humans too, because a lot of shit can go wrong
Hmm.
because nature doesn't give a shit about us.
And to anybody who thinks Asimov is irrelevant and old and wasn't a good writer, I'm sorry. A story like this, with all this stuff coming up, written in 1941, Asimov, this shows how great a science fiction writer he really was.
Incredible foresight.
I mean, this was a dangerous vision for
Hmm.
1941.
Yeah,
You
which
know,
is
we
interesting
were
because
going
he
through
didn't
the
want to be in dangerous
Yeah.
visions.
Well, he wasn't the kind of dangerous that they were looking for in 1967. But,
Yeah,
I've been through a number of his early stories that
yeah,
dealt with issues of racism and religion
yeah.
And, now this one, all the wide-ranging issues
Hmm.
of a technology that didn't even exist in
Yes.
1941. None of these things we're talking about even existed when Asimov wrote it, but
Closest
he
thing
wrote
was
a story
automatons, which
that,
were clockwork.
yeah, that
Hmm.
brings it up. And it's interesting, the whole idea of this power beam.
Hmm.
We're not able to do it yet. We have had some experiments beaming
Hmm.
power across distances that have had some success.
Hmm.
But the idea of beaming power down from space is instrumental in the book The High Frontier by Gerard K. O'Neill. His whole
Ooh.
plan for how we could populate space partially hinged on the idea of putting these satellites around Earth that were
Hmm.
collecting solar power and beaming it down,
Hmm.
just like Asimov is talking about 40 years earlier.
And they kind of started talking about that too in that short story we read ages ago. What was it? The Bomb, where they had that nuclear power plant that was really unstable.
Let There
And they
Be
were,
Light by
yeah,
Heinlein. Yeah,
yeah. And
that
then they
was written
shot
about in
it.
the same time.
Yeah, so they shot it up and or they decided they were going to shoot it up into space and beam down the energy. So this is a concept that has been on the human imagination for generations.
Yeah.
And now we're just starting to see it become fruitful, which is so cool to me, but also like what an extremely interesting concept of foresight. Like
Mm-hmm.
people just paying attention to what was happening in science or the potential of future science and then it becoming real. That's
Well,
really neat.
but it also shows, a lot of people treat human beings of the past as if they're total morons just
Hmm.
because they didn't have computers and cars and airplanes. Um, all the things we have today are the result of those people sitting down and thinking about things
Yeah.
and thinking it through and coming up with the foundational things that we have built upon
Hmm.
towards what we have today.
Yeah.
So, yes, these science fiction writers were sitting down and using their heads and thinking this through and coming up with these ideas
Hmm.
and then using it to write silly little science fiction stories in a pulp magazine.
And
But
then decades later, it's becoming an actual
yeah.
technology that we're using.
Hmm.
That's just
And of course,
shocking.
that's not a function of literature, but it's still um, at the same time that they're looking at the technology, they're
Yeah.
thinking about how it's going to impact us
Hmm.
and thinking these issues through
Yeah.
about how we're going to deal with robots that become self-aware. What are those robots going to become self-aware of?
Hmm.
In this case, they start their own religion.
Yes. I
Um,
mean,
and that's an issue. Once
yeah.
robots do start thinking more like humans, are they going to think what we expect them to think? Are we going to think what we tell them to think?
Hmm.
Or are they going to go off in their own path?
Yeah. Or are we going to even let that kind of AI exist
Hmm.
because of fear? I
And
think that's
that's,
another question to
well,
ask too.
we got people that are developing towards that.
I know.
And if it's possible for them to truly become self-aware, it's going to happen,
Yeah.
whether we like it or not.
Yes.
When it does happen, everybody's going to be shitting bricks because
Yeah.
we don't know what that's going
Well,
to look
dang.
like.
Hmm. Robot overlords.
And that's part of the problem of technology is that we've got these people that are throwing it out there for
Hmm.
self-interest and profit,
Yeah.
and they're not thinking about the consequences. What happens when those
Yeah.
robots decide they're better than us and enslave us, you
What
know?
happens when the robots are what is it? Amelia Bedeliaing all over the place too because of conditional logic. Are
Amelia
you are
Bedelia.
you familiar with Amelia Bedelia?
I've heard the term, but I
She
can't
takes
remember.
it's a children's stories where she takes everything that's said to her, including figure of speeches, literally.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's more likely to happen with robots, and they're just gonna fuck shit up. But it's still at our expense.
Oh, then don't ever tell a robot to fuck you.
Fuck off, robot. What?
That will be
Yeah,
very
like,
painful.
yeah. Eat shit and die, robot. It will. It absolutely will.
Oh no.
Oh, yeah. So I have a feeling it's either going to be they'll become our overlords because we have become obsolete, or they're just gonna Amelia Bedelia all over the place, and we'll just be like, we can't let this keep happening. It's getting expensive.
Well, and that's kind of what's happening right now with AI is that some of the weird stuff that
Yeah.
GPT returns, like I saw one on the internet, somebody said that how to make pizza, that Chat
Yes.
GPT told them it should
It
include
should include
glue.
glue. Mm-hmm.
Because it saw somewhere on the internet
Yeah.
something connecting glue to pizza,
Mm-hmm.
and so it put it in the recipe,
Yep.
not knowing that that does not make any kind of sense
Mm-hmm.
because it can't know that,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Uh,
And like that was the other thing too. When I was in school and taking my computer ethics class, we were introduced to Alice, who was an virtual reality chatbot essentially that learned based off of what people told it.
mhm,
So anybody could tell it anything and it would take it as a learning experience, including if it was lies.
mhm.
So you would just have bizarre conversations with this chatbot when you would start asking it questions about God or humans or anything. It would
And of
just
course,
have,
we're training AI off the internet.
yeah,
Oh, crap.
I know. And there's a lot of false information on the
Yeah.
internet, and there's a lot of opinion on the internet that is misguided or, completely countercultural.
Mhm.
Not necessarily that those are bad things, but it disrupts the
We know how
status
to
quo.
filter it.
Yeah.
AI doesn't,
AI doesn't know how to filter it. It
because it
doesn't
isn't
know how to fact
it
check.
isn't intelligent. That's why we call it artificial.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, we have a whole bunch of other slew of problems that can show up if we start
Yeah.
having robots do some things.
Hmm.
But,
And Asimov was thinking about all that way
mm-hmm.
back then when he wrote Reason.
Yep. So, still relevant. To me, this is a top tale.
Oh yeah.
Really enjoyed this one. I really feel like it should have been in Dangerous Missions. This does feel dangerous to kind of approach this subject, especially for the time it was written.
Yeah, it definitely is like that. And I don't know, they did retro Hugos to cover
Mm-hmm.
all the years before the Hugo Awards started in
Mm-hmm.
1953. But I don't think they did retro Hugos for 1942, which would have been all the stories for 1941.
Mm-hmm.
Because there, I don't have anything here of Reason having even a nomination for it.
Okay.
So it hasn't won any awards, but that's because there weren't any awards around in
Mm-hmm.
1941
Mm-hmm.
to cover it. I saw something today about somebody who wanted to cover all those years that
Yeah.
haven't been covered yet,
Yeah.
but there are people who just think all the retro Hugos should be thrown out because they weren't voted on at the time. They're being
Yeah.
voted on 50 years later.
Yeah. And we do have our own difference and biases and different ways.
We're
Our
a
lens
different
is so
society. Yeah.
different. Yeah. Our lens is so different now. And there are some things that were hindsight is 2020.
But at the same time, my feeling is that it's more accurate for us to look back at 1941 now and decide which stories still hold up
I think that's
than to
fair.
make that decision in 1942.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
You know,
And think that needs to continue as well
because
on through
I
different
think it's
decades or generations.
1954 or 55 they gave the best novel to They'd Rather Be Right, which
Mm-hmm.
people try to read that today and they go, "What the fuck?
Yeah.
This book is so bad."
This is trippy as fuck.
We got to read that one sometime and
I'm
find out for
excited.
ourselves. But
Yes, I know.
um,
You've mentioned that before.
yeah, so at the time, everybody thought that was the coolest novel. Now nobody understands
It's like,
why it ever was even nominated for a Hugo
this is
Award.
weird.
So that's why I do think there should be a good chunk of time before we look back and say, okay, these were the best stories.
Yeah. And I think it should be based on relevancy by generation.
Hmm.
I think that's fair because every generation
Yeah, we
has
have to try and
some
keep
of
the
the old, but a
politics
lot of
out of it.
new. Yeah, that's true.
The political climate in 1941 was nothing like we have today. And
Yeah,
so a lot of
very
the
different.
woke stuff and things
Mhm.
like that have no application to anything that was written in 1941.
No, except through our own biases and lenses.
Yeah.
But that also is a contingent on relevancy. how relevant is it to now based
But
off of those
another 50
times?
years from now, the stuff we're writing today is going to be irrelevant.
Yeah.
The whole political climate of today will have changed, morphed into something that we can't even imagine right now.
Yes. But I think that's why we still need to keep going generation by generation to look at these, to
Yeah.
see how time has changed, but
Hmm.
still have record of what was still considered popular
Hmm.
versus now. So people who are interested in the was can still see what was available to them and try to understand why that time and culture this was important versus now.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's kind of dangerous to have cancel culture because people don't learn unless they know,
Yeah.
and you can't erase history, and
You
you can't.
can.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want people to know,
Lots of dictators have done that.
I know, but if you want people to truly know and actually seek truth and understanding,
Hmm.
you have to also look at the ugly and realize that
Yeah.
we can't go back
Otherwise,
to
we'll
that.
repeat it.
Absolutely. Well, we'll probably repeat it anyway because humans can't. Sometimes we're just dumb.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, seeing the result then
Hmm.
can also give us an idea of the result now.
But a story like this, to judge from today, you have a lot of people that would go, well, the only human beings in this story, there's two guys and then two other guys at the very end. There's no women.
Mm-hmm.
There's no gays. There's no blacks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so from today's
Well,
politics,
as far as we
this
know, there's
story is a
no
complete
anyone.
fit.
We
Yeah.
don't know the race of these guys. We're assuming that they're white because of the time they were done. But yes.
And we also assume that they are going back to Earth. Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
robot is right.
And we don't know if they're trans or not because if they decided to switch their genders.
Well, true.
Yeah,
But I mean, there isn't
they're dead
anything
named.
specific,
Mm-hmm.
those things that we value in that people are valuing in fiction today
Are gonna
are
change.
not in this story.
Yes.
So people would judge this today from that standpoint. And in my opinion, they'd be completely wrong to judge this a failure of a story just
Yeah.
because it's not pandering to today's popular politics.
Trending. Yep. Trending politics. Though I think if we just look at it on the issue of AI, it's absolutely
Oh,
relevant.
yeah.
So if you're not okay looking at this with that single issue, great. But yeah, we have two dudes in a spaceship waiting for two other dudes to come get him while this robot builds a religion. That's
Hmm.
the synopsis.
Hmm.
Robot religion.
Yeah.
Like that episode of Futurama. Gonna make our own church with blackjack and hookers. Oh, but
Get a
yeah.
lot of followers.
Yep. But yeah. And I mean, we could unpack even more in this if we started diving deeper, but we've gone so long in this video.
Yeah.
I feel like we're gonna beat the dead horse. This might be a story, though, that I think we need to revisit someday. Because
Someday. Yeah.
I think we'll see how AI goes and then we'll revisit it. I
Yeah.
think that'd be
It'll be
interesting.
interesting 10
But
years
yeah,
from now to see where we stand in relation to this.
yeah. So for me, this is a top tale.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think this is a fantastic work. So,
Definitely. And of course, if you're looking for the story, pretty much any major science fiction anthology,
yeah.
um, I- Asimov's own books, it's the book I, Robot is a collection of his earliest
Mm-hmm.
robot stories,
Mm-hmm.
and that's easily available.
Yeah.
Um, Later, he did a collection of not just I, Robot, but all the novels and all the later stories he wrote
Mm-hmm.
that was called the Robot Collection.
Nice.
And then he did another one that included that and more stories called The Complete Robot. And so there's plenty of books out there where you can find this story. And of course, the issue of Astounding that this appeared in is for free online if you want to
Yeah.
Google it.
There's a PDF that you can download, and it
Yeah.
does work with Kindle as well as Apple Books.
Yep.
So,
So no lack of finding this one if you really want to read it
yes.
at
Al-
any price.
Also, I am loving reading when you find these old PDFs. I want to do a video sometime of just reading the advertisement
Oh,
from these
we could
because
do
they
that.
are absolutely like some of them are so unhinged. One of them was looking for actual like time travelers at one point when I was looking. I should have taken a screenshot of that one. I don't remember which. we still have it in the drive somewhere. But the ads on these are
Are you
hilarious
signing up for the
too.
Rosicrucians yet?
I know, right? I would love to get my own little space station. I want a piece of a space station
Yeah.
or that kind of thing. Yeah. So there's, if you find the original PDF, there's just such a gem of advertising and illustration and all kinds of stuff. So I do recommend the PDF if you
Mm-hmm.
can find it or an original copy
Mm-hmm.
because they are just,
The original copy of this goes for a hefty price.
I'm sure it does, but maybe y'all have that. I don't know.
Some people out there will.
Yeah. So, but hey, this was a great work, and also those ads are hilarious. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's all I gotta say.
Okay. I think we should call it quits on
Yeah.
this one.
So, thanks for joining us, guys. Let us know what you think. We've covered a lot of stuff here, a lot of topics. If there's any new ones that we didn't cover, feel free to join us in the comments and talk about it. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, and our next Isaac Asimov story will be another robot story titled Liar. So
Ooh,
you can guess what that
interesting.
gets into.
Interesting. Yeah, so join us for that one, guys. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.